Tell me what you'd do if the most feared beings in the galaxy walked straight into your party, and only an 8-year-old dared to say hello. Evan Rhodes checked the seam of his daughter's travel jacket again, fingertips skating over the filament weave that caught the violet glow of the station's corridor lights. The jacket didn't need checking. He needed calming. Lena, gap-toothed and buoyant on an extra dose of curiosity, tilted a grin up at him. "Dad, I'm not breakable," she said, the words fogging the glass as a freighter ghosted past the observation slit. The Concord Spire, headquarters of the Pan-Galactic Compact, hung above the world called Haven like a chandelier over a ballroom. Lattices of transparent alloy, skinned in starlight, humming with languages that didn't always belong to mouths. Gravity-slick natives drifted in lamp-bright pods. Tripedal merchants trod with bell chimes. A jelly of sentient mist flowed through a pressure door. Somewhere deeper in, strings were being tuned and old arguments rehearsed. Evan hadn't planned to bring Lena to a diplomatic reception, especially not one with this guest list. But his partner was across the system supervising a Mars ring harvest. The school had shuttered for the solar recess, and humanity's newest ambassador couldn't find an Earthside sitter who knew how to say no to steering thrusters or yes to bedtime. So they came, together, on the assumption that the dullest danger is the safe kind. The doors side open to a hall with a ceiling of moving sky, a live starfield that never repeated. Platters floated by on whisper fields, each bearing foods that steamed, sang, or tried not to be eaten. Lena lunged toward a translucent cube that breathed, and Evan redirected her to a bowl of tame fruit cylinders that tasted like pears pretending to be cinnamon. "Ambassador Rhodes," rasped a voice like two tectonic plates greeting. Threx of Scalos, emerald-scaled and pupil-slit, spread a double-jointed smile that showed a museum's worth of teeth. "You have brought your small one. My daughter, Lena. If that's acceptable." "Acceptable?" Threx blinked in the slow, ceremonial way of his species. "It is unusual." Nairi of Hive Cluster 7 followed, her gem-bright eyes mirroring the starfield ceiling. Though singular in body, her words always arrived in chords, dozens of minds braided into one sound. "The human has brought a juvenile," the chorus noted. "Unanticipated variable." "She wanted to see the station," Evan said. "We isolate our juveniles until emergence," Nairi sang. "To protect the hive, to protect the juvenile, to protect outcomes." "What's an emergence?" Lena whispered. "I'll explain later," Evan whispered back, already losing count of things he would explain later. A silver chime rippled the room. Conversation diluted into silence. From the center of the hall, a light being ghosted together, Vox emissary of the Compact. "Honored delegates," it intoned, voice like cathedral glass. "Tonight we affirm our commitment to dialogue with the Starfire Dominion." The temperature climbed as if someone had lifted the sun a degree closer. Evan saw his own breath stop in his chest. Dragons, he thought, not the fairy tale kind. Spacefaring ancients who held 3 sectors in a grip of fire and legend. Every contact attempt had ended in wreckage or rumor. The Compact's invitation had been meant as symbolism, not RSVP. It happened like a bad idea deciding to be beautiful, air shimmering, heat waves tasting like copper, a twist of flame uncurled in the center of the hall. Security Chief Core, fur bristling, paws already moving barriers into blue-hued planes, growled orders no one wanted to need. The flame gained physics, then personality. A horned head coalesced, scales like heated ore, eyes 2 patient embers. Neck shoulders a cathedral-long body. Wings folded tight as secrets, 40 feet nose to tail, and yet the sense of it stretched farther. A presence you felt in marrow. "I am Aurelia," thundered the voice, translators scrambling to carry it without shattering. "Matriarch of the Starfire." Dozens of species forgot how to blink. Threx trembled. Neari's many thought threads tangled, then smoothed. "We invited. We did not expect." The embarrassment smelled like ozone. "You invited me expecting?" Absence, Aurelia replied, head tilting with the clinic calm of a surgeon about to cut. I smelled your relief in the ink. The blue barriers came alive with a hum that hinted at comfort and futility. Evan pulled Lena behind one, only to feel her slip away. The field rose high enough to stop anyone groan. It did not anticipate the exact stubbornness of an 8-year-old human child determined to meet the center of the room. Lena! Evan slammed his palms to the field. The barrier thrummed back, safe, firm, useless. Shoes ticking lightly, Lena crossed the hall like gravity was a polite suggestion, not a rule. Aurelia lowered a city's worth of head. Smoke embroidered the air between them. Child, she said, the syllable a warm avalanche. You are not afraid. Should I be? Lena asked, chin tipped up, eyes reflecting a dragon's sunrise. Everyone else looks scared. But you look tired and pretty, like my mom's necklace when the sun hits it. The word traveled oddly in a voice made for thunder. Pretty, Aurelia echoed. Lena took another step. Are you lonely? The room stopped, pretending to breathe. Somewhere behind the barriers, Threx covered his eyes. Neri's chorus dropped to a single thin strand. Chief Kor's hand hovered near a weapon he would never use. Aurelia's answer came from some deep place that didn't owe anyone an explanation. 5 millennia I have flown, she said softly, like a mountain teaching the wind a secret. No one has asked me that. The heat in the room shifted, still fierce but now like sunlight in winter, warming what had gone cold. Lena reached up and gently, absurdly, inevitably, touched scale. A kiss, quick as a comet. A sound rolled through the hall like distant rain on stone. Joy felt like heat being kind. You invite me, Aurelia declared at last, voice rolling outward to every listening translator bead, every folded ear, every frightened heart. And you will speak with me, but you will speak through those who see, the humans. Her eyes, small suns, returned to Lena. We will fly, little one. And as suddenly as flame decides to be smoke, she folded back into shimmer and was gone, leaving warmth, astonishment, and the smell of a promise. What happens when a child becomes the only translator a dragon clan trusts? The emergency chamber felt too small for history, plain ring of seats, metal walls that forgot how to be impressive, half the chairs empty because news outruns bodies. Evan sat with Lena's legs scissoring the air. Her feet didn't reach the floor, but her attention reached everything. Elder. Bryn arrived leaning on his humstaff, bark-textured and moon-old, a forest carved into a person. We will begin, he said, patience braided into the words. The holographic replay unspooled, heat haze becoming dragon, the quiet defiance of a child crossing a floor, a kiss that tilted a galaxy. You endangered the room, Threx managed, scales gone a shade paler. The juvenile asked what no one else thought to ask. Neri's many-voiced mind cut in. Result? Non-catastrophic engagement with ultra-threat entity, anomalous vector, empathy. Dr. Hayes, human xenopsyche lead, lifted a hand. Protocol is designed to protect and it's good, but protocols are built from what we've already survived. We haven't survived dragons. Our models overweight force and underweight feeling. Feelings are not measures, Threx objected. They are if the other party uses them as instruments, Hayes said, tapping the frozen frame where Aurelia's eyes changed at the word lonely. Watch this moment. Surprise, pain, recognition, not weakness, data. The child's question touched a frequency our training doesn't cover. Elder Bryn turned to Lena. Did you understand danger? Everyone was scared, Lena said after thinking it honest. She looked more sad than mean. The chamber's air altered again, like a storm deciding whether to land. A new image bloomed, not a replay, live. Aurelia, carried in light from whatever ship we pretended not to notice stalking the station's blind spots. I am listening, the dragon said simply. Bryn bowed. We are honored. My kin withdrew, Aurelia said, voice steady as a held bridge. Not because we craved ruin, but because ruin kept craving us. Species wanted our fire for their engines, our scales for their wars, our space for their hunger. They wrote monsters in their stories when we wrote boundaries in the sky, Lena's hand shot up because school has rules and habits have gravity. Why didn't you just tell them? She asked. We did, Aurelia said. They translated I hurt into you threaten. They measured our fear as force on readiness. When language breaks, so does trust. Threx's tail gave a traitor twitch. We treat emotion as inefficiency. Strategy speaks. Feeling distracts. And that, Hayes said gently, is why your people never reached them. Aurelia turned her gaze back to Lena. You asked if I was lonely. You looked like the new kid on the first day, Lena replied. Everyone pretending not to stare. A sound that might be a chuckle and might be a small earthquake shivered the display. We will speak, Aurelia said, through those who remember that persons are not problems, through humans. The room filled with arguments wearing polite clothes. Advantages, access, asymmetry. Threx finally said the quiet part without shame. You grant them favor. Yes, Aurelia said. Favor follows those who risk kindness. A door inside history opened. No one had the map. But the hallway, beyond smelled like a future where new tools might be questions instead of cannons. If dragons choose humanity as their bridge, what does the other side of that bridge look like? 3 dawns later, the viewport showed an orange sky, stitched with floating islands. Pyros, or whatever name the dragons used before language learned to wrap them, was a physics professor's recurring nightmare, crossed with an artist's favorite dream. Rivers of light ran uphill. Crystals grew like cities had feelings. Sensors insisted none of this should be survivable. Lungs disagreed and breathed easy. Aurelia stepped from shadow like she had been there the whole time, heat in her wake that felt like oven door warmth and summer afternoon comfort at once. 2 others came with her. Frost, a scholar whose breath curled air into lace, and Cinder, memory keeper whose scales drank light and returned it as stories. Welcome to our home, Aurelia said. We learn to fold it from threats. We can unfold it for guests. Lena ran straight into the dragon's foreleg hug like that was an ordinary thing to do when meeting an apex legend on her porch. Evan's brain, the prudent part, made a brief high-pitched noise only he could hear. Council observers disembarked with rehearsed humility and unpracticed awe. Threx's scales brightened a respectful hue. Nairi's forearms carried devices heavy with questions. We believed your number small, Nairi admitted as winged shapes traced the orange sky. A misread. Not few, Frost said. Not many. Just enough to keep promises. They entered a cavern where walls wore history. Relief showed dragons teaching stars how to sing, delivering power, not taking it. Then chains. Then escape lit by the kind of fire that makes new rules. Cinder's voice gentled at the panel of a hatchling in a cage. We stopped offering our gifts because gifts kept being repackaged as debts. Evan touched a groove carved 5 centuries deep. How many asked you what you wanted? Define asked, Frost said dryly. Asked without attaching a price tag. The dragons looked at one another, the silence longer than most species could stand. None, Aurelia answered at last, until your small one asked if we were lonely. She turned to Lena, lowering her head until her eyes were not suns but simply eyes. We are built for reading intent, little human. It is a burden. We feel the calculus in a room the way you feel a draft. We know when someone comes to claim, not to know. We grow tired of being weighed. Nairi's chorus softened. We never learned to be alone. We do not parse loneliness. My people admire strength, Threx admitted. We treat loneliness like a flaw to be sealed. And so you never found us, Aurelia said without malice. Because you did not look with the part that could see. She led them through the cavern to a city no non-dragon had seen in a half-millennium. Bridges of tempered light. Rookeries like museums of sunsets. Younglings playing tag with thermals while exhaling careful bursts that glittered. Lena's hand found Evan's. He had the wild thought that maybe weapons were just what species invented, before they remembered gentler inventions like listening. Will I get to come back? Lena asked, bouncing between wonder and impatience in the way only children and comets can. You will always be welcome, Aurelia said. You and those who come to meet, not harvest. Terms followed. spoken with the clarity of a treaty that preferred feelings but still respected ink. Respect without extraction, recognition without exploitation, access through humans who proved they could say no as well as yes. Somewhere behind them, Threx calculated, recalculated, and, startling himself, stopped calculating long enough to agree. Evan caught the weight in the room. The lift, too. Humanity would be a door. Doors change both sides of themselves. When the Dragon Council asks humanity to be more than allies, something closer to family, who says yes and at what cost? The council chamber on Pyros was carved from a single crystal big enough to convince mountains to be humble. 5 ancients sat in a circle, each a different color of heat. Aurelia took the center like a hearth. Observers stood at the periphery tasting history. Why humans? Asked ancient, gray, wing-scarred, voice like wind inventing caves. You are not the strongest nor the most. You are, however, inconveniently, earnest. Evan resisted the mouthful of diplomacy he'd practiced. Intent thrummed in the air. Obvious, readable. We try to understand, he said. We fail a lot. We try again. Our best people lead with connection. One child's kindness is not a species-wide policy, noted Shimmer. Scales oil slick with color. What happens when she grows and the world teaches her to count the wrong things? Lena squeezed Evan's hand, then stepped forward because children step forward before they learn how to wait. I'll still be me, she said. My teacher makes sure no one eats lunch alone. Mr. Ortiz fixes the neighbor's porch and won't take credits. People do good things, even when nobody's scoring. You can make a rule out of that. Ancient made a sound halfway between sigh and laugh. She argues like our young. Cinder unfurled a data panel woven from light. Partnership proposal. We open 3 sectors to human exploration and protection. We share knowledge under terms you will help enforce. You represent us to the compact until we relearn how to be among those who forgot how to see us. That makes humans gatekeepers to dragon space. Admiral Rowe, seconded to the joint defense effort, said carefully. Yes, Frost answered. The door chooses its doorkeeper. Neri stepped in from the observer ring, forearms folded in a shape her people used for contrition. We were wrong, she said, all her minds in agreement. We optimized for outcomes and minimized persons. We intend to learn, Threx lowered his gaze. Submission, not shame. We measured strength and found a wall. We forgot bridges are stronger than walls when rivers rise. Aurelia turned to Lena, eyes softening at the edges. There is one more offer. Old, not given in an age, first friend. A bond between our kind and one small one who will learn us, live with us part of her year, help stitch the first seams of return. Protected as kin, taught as kin, asked to be brave in ways we can promise will be worth it. Evan's heart did a coin flip and landed on both sides. She's 8, not forever, Aurelia said gently. We ask the family, not just the child. I want to do it, Lena blurted, and then, catching up to the gravity, added, if Mom and Dad say yes. Wisdom. Consulting your constellation, Shimmer said. Pleased, Ancient rose with the grace of a building uncollapsing. We vote. The light in the crystal shifted, records were made, and the future picked a direction. Partners, not merely allies. Doors and bridges. Ink and feeling. Partnership signed. Now meet the enemies no one asked the dragons about, because no one ever asked. 6 months blurred into something like a new normal. On the conquered spire's observation ring, traffic lanes threaded like embroidery. Lena, now 9.5 and in possession of a jacket embroidered with gifted, non-weaponized scales, tapped updates into a tablet that held math homework beside dragon phonemes. Ambassador Chen wants your take on the trade corridor, she said, not quite rolling her eyes at the idea that grown-ups still needed takes. Threx arrived first. Scales brighter and body language less coiled than it used to be. We are piloting empathy modules in diplomat training, he reported, pride carefully disguised as formality. We asked our rivals what they actually needed. We ended a 50-year border stupidity in 50 minutes. Neri followed with numbers that tasted like a tide chart. 23 species have applied for human-mediated access to dragon sectors. 12 approved, 8 under review, 3 declined for transactional intent without cultural engagement. They didn't want friends, Lena said, taking the weight of being believed with the seriousness of someone who knows what trust costs to earn. Admiral Rowe overlaid a star map that thinned at the edges of the known. The rim, she said, Automated kill machines from a civilization that forgot how to stop. Dragons have kept them out for 3,000 years. While we called them monsters, Threx murmured. We never asked, Rose said. We will now. Coordination grids go live next week. For the first time in a long time, they won't stand that watch alone. Aurelia entered with Spark, young diplomat, red scales that blushed darker when human custom surprised him. I am better at greetings, Spark announced, proud. Only 2 alarms this week. Progress, Lena grinned. We like not being on fire before breakfast. The day unspooled in briefings. Schools trading students across species. Embassies applying for Pyros addresses. Engineers inventing kindertech because someone finally said that was a requirement, not a nice to have. Somewhere between meetings, Evan realized the strangest miracle. The galaxy hadn't grown smaller. It had grown closer. When the room finally emptied, Lena stood with Aurelia at the window that pretended to be a sky. Are you still lonely sometimes? She asked quietly. The dragon paused long enough to be honest. Sometimes, she said. 5,000 years of habits do not vanish in 6 months. But the quiet echoes less. Good, Lena said, hugging a leg that could break starships and instead held children. You have us now. The rim machines are waking, and this time humans and dragons answer together. But who speaks for the enemy that cannot feel? The first joint patrol felt like a parade that had misplaced its music. Human ships hulls matte and earnest. Dragon silhouettes hot enough to convince sensors they were dreaming. At the rim, silence breaks in patterns. You learn which ones mean teeth. The machines came the way bad weather does. Slow, inevitable, with memories of old wars stitched into their code. Targets vectoring on civilian corridor, Roe called. Voice clipped but not brittle. Engage on non-lethal if possible. Learn if possible. Survive, full stop. Aurelia's shadow slid along Evan's viewport like a promise. They do not negotiate, she said. They only complete. But completion can be repurposed. Human EM nets, designed by people who had finally learned to ask the right questions, bloomed like flowers that caught lightning. Dragonfire lanced not to vaporize but to rewrite. Heat that etched new instructions told old code to sleep. Frost sang in a frequency machines remembered as a command. Spark wove between trajectories, laughing in the way the young do when fear and joy shake hands. Lena watched from a safe seat on the spire. Small hands curled into hope, voice on the line like a charm. You've got this. They did. Not cleanly, not without loss, but together in ways that made together mean something new. Capture pods thudded onto the spire's secure deck hours later, full of enemy cores or the brittle architecture that passed for them. Hayes and a cross-species team approached the puzzle not with delight but with care. What if they aren't angry? Lena asked, looking through the glass at lattices that didn't know stories. What if they're just stuck? Then we build a door even code can understand, Hayes said. Days became a workshop. Draconic harmonics mapped to human math. Threx's people offered threat models softened by empathy they were still learning to name. Neri's chorus borrowed a few human poets to help explain motive to systems that never had one. In the lab's quiet heart, Aurelia lowered her head so the captured core could hear her at dragon scale whisper. We will make a future where your purpose can be gentler. When the signal finally unfolded right, the machine jittered once, then went still. The stillness of sleep, not death. Codes swam into new shapes. Out at the rim, others followed suit not because they were asked, but because language had finally found them. Evan found Lena asleep on a bench outside the lab, tablet open to a half-finished assignment about gravity and why it is rude. He covered her with his jacket and watched Aurelia watch the child. The dragon's gaze, old as starlight, looked exactly like relief. The next day's work would be meetings, signatures, refusals, second chances, the machinery of peace humming the way engines hum when someone remembers to oil them. It would be hard and boring and necessary, but for one bright earned moment, the station windows held the reflection of something like a galaxy practicing kindness out loud. The conquered spire had a spot, nobody marked it on maps, where station night gathered like a cat on warm stone. Evan liked to stand there after debriefs, when the glass went dark enough to mirror but not so dark you forgot the stars beyond were not a trick. Tonight the spire's quiet felt earned. Traffic lanes drifted in tidy strands. A distant tug blinked the lazy Morse of a ship that had made its delivery and was in no rush to leave. Lena, Jacket sleeves rolled to show the embroidered scales that were emphatically ceremonial and absolutely not armor. Took 3 skipping steps, then breathed on the pain, drawing a lopsided bridge with her finger. "Dad," she said, "do you think bridges get tired?" "Only if rivers keep trying to run away," Evan said, crouching beside the foggy artwork. She made the railings thicker, mouth pinched in concentration that looked exactly like her mother's when a harvest schedule didn't care about weather. "Good thing we can make stronger ones." Aurelia arrived without the dramatics of fire. You didn't need to make an entrance when the room rearranged itself around your presence anyway. The dragon folded down the way mountains might if mountains were polite. "Your engineers named the new EM nets after you," she told Lena. Lena, linguistic empathic neural arrays. "Acronyms are your species' poetry," Lena beamed. "The kind you don't have to rhyme." "Function rhymes with survival," Aurelia said, a smile in the voice that wasn't really a smile but was absolutely one. They stood together, father, daughter legend, watching the rim where machines had quieted to a sleep that felt like mercy. Below the observation ring, a festival had spilled into the spire's long halls. A cautious, relieved joy with food that sang less and consented more, and a band trying to teach a tripedal rhythm section how to swing. Threx padded up, scales recolored to a relaxed dusk. "We completed the last prisoner transfer to rehabilitation labs," he reported. But the report came soft, more talk than ledger. "Nuri's hive is composing an apology opera. They insist I sing. You'll be great," Lena said with the cheer of someone who had never heard him attempt a note. A shiver of light resolved into a holographic window from Pyros. Ancient, shimmer frost cinder all the council, flickering around the edges like a memory that refused to fade properly. "Final review," Ancient said. "Bureaucracy is the instrument by which miracles are made routine." Evan almost laughed. "That's the slogan on half our office mugs." "Your mugs are honest," Frost replied. They ticked through the list. Joint patrol protocols, school exchange rosters, repair grants for border systems that once knew dragons only as rumors and now knew them as neighbors. It felt like a garden ledger. Watering schedules, trellis angles. Not thrilling exactly, but the opposite of disaster. The galaxy for once smelled like something you could plant things in. "Last item," Cinder said, scales glinting with story. "We lifted a seal in the Red Archive." Aurelia's head tilted, a cathedral considering a whisper. "That seal was dragon-locked." "Yes," Cinder said, and keyed, curiously, to human harmonics. "A song pattern." Evan felt the tiny drop in his stomach that heralded the good kind of trouble. "You're saying we had a key to your archive?" Shimmer brought up an image. Pale notation lines that weren't lines at all but curving filaments of light, twisting through scales of pitch no human throat could manage alone. The caption pulsed in Old Draconic. Aurelia translated without ceremony. "Lullaby to cross the Ember Gate." Lena went very still. "A lullaby?" Cinder overlaid a second layer. A centuries-old human score recovered last month from a shipwrecked colony vault on a world nobody had visited in 200 years. The melody was simple, haunted, the kind of tune you hum without knowing why. When the two notations merged, dragon filaments and human stave, their curves aligned, unfurling into a single, impossible harmony. The seal sigils in the archive's perimeter swept aside as neatly as curtains. "We believed our first contact with humans was present tense," Ancient said quietly. "This suggests earlier contact. With one of our broods long ago, lost in the fires that made us leave." Aurelia lowered her gaze to Lena. "Your lullaby," she said, voice mild and monumental at once. "It was taught to your child singers. It matched ours well enough to open a door we had forgotten." Lena blinked. "My teacher plays that before math." Threx sat down because sometimes the most diplomatic thing you can do is sit before the world tips. "We documented no such shared melody." "Memory is a muscle," Nairi said from a new chorus node, joining the hollow late and unapologetic. "Ours atrophied around certain pains. We sing again. We remember again." Evan felt the old ache of questions too large for one body. Who carried a dragon lullaby to human throats? A traveler stranded between homes? A desperate parent who met kindness in the shape of a wing? A pack that never got its ink because history took the pen? "We can trace the path," Cinder said, answering the unasked. The archive door opened to a corridor of letters, fragments. "It names a broodmother not on our rolls. It speaks of the Ember Gate, not a metaphor. A place. Aurelia hummed, and the glass did that tiny sympathetic buzz it did when her resonance leaned in. The Ember Gate opens on a drift between sectors, a pocket space we sealed when we fled. We assumed everything inside was ash. Lena's hand sought the embroidered rail of her bridge drawing, as if checking that her finger-painted crossing could handle a new river. What if someone's been singing there, waiting for us to hear it again? No one said what children sometimes say by accident, the most terrifyingly hopeful thing in the room. Gate coordinates are difficult, Frost said, bringing up a star field that rearranged itself in the fussy way maps do when they mean expensive trips. But the lullaby acts as a beacon. The harmonics pull. Rose's voice slid in from the comm line, steady and already planning 3 contingencies past everyone else. Exploration unit can be wheels up by morning. Human pilots paired with dragon escorts. Light touch, heavy caution. Aurelia's gaze stayed on Lena. First friend, she said softly, as if testing the title against air. We do not bring children to doors we expect to be traps. I know, Lena whispered, not hiding the disappointment. Then she squared, a small commander reporting to herself. You'll tell me everything when you get back. Everything, Aurelia promised. And this time her smile was visible even to human eyes. The festival drifted upward, laughter finding the observation ring, the band figuring out how to let a hive chorus lead a bridge. Someone passed by with a platter of fruit cylinders, scenting the air with pear and cinnamon nostalgia. Evan took one and broke it in half, handing the bigger piece to Lena because some traditions are older than treaties. On the pane, Lena's fog-drawn bridge had started to fade. She refreshed it with a quick breath, then added a little door in the middle, the kind you'd paint bright red if you were the kind of person who believed doors should be easy to find. For the Ember Gate, she said, pleased with herself. A small tremor rolled through the spire's bones as docking clamps released somewhere below. Ships took their places around the old new melody, dragons flexed heat that meant homecoming, not warning. The lullaby, human simple, dragon vast, threaded the hallway like a rumor that wanted to become a headline. People slowed without knowing why. Even the machine sleeping in the rehab lab stirred, architectures registering the tune as a non-hostile directive. Stand down. Listen. Evan rested his forehead against the cool glass beside his daughter's drawing. 5,000 years of flight, a morning's mission plan, and a song that should never have been shared but was. The galaxy did not feel smaller. It felt like a story that had decided not to end where the chapter break once was. Aurelia reached out one talon and, absurdly, perfectly, traced the red door Lena had sketched. We will knock, she said, and we will listen before we speak. Good, Lena said. That's the rule. Threx chuckled, surprised at himself for finding the sound in his chest. The rule, he agreed. The lullaby shifted key, aligning with navigational beacons. Pyros brightened on the horizon the way a hearth does when someone lifts the kettle just before it boils. Doors remembered. Bridges held. Somewhere far away, something heard its name said kindly for the first time in an age. Aurelia straightened, heat gathering like a blessing. Time, she said, and the word tasted like courage. When the Ember Gate opens, what steps through? A friend we forgot, a promise we broke, or a truth that rewrites who found whom first? The launch felt like a held breath finally exhaled. 3 human corvettes, sleek, matte, their hulls humming with Lena arrays, took formation around 2 dragons. Aurelia in the lead, Frost on the starboard shadow where temperature drops could serve as signal and shield. The lullaby, braided now into a navigational hymn, threaded every channel. It wasn't loud, but it filled the gaps between orders the way a good road fills the space between towns. All ships. Confirm, Admiral Rose said, voice steady, unhurried, the tone of someone who had practiced calm until it became muscle memory. Corvette Red Wing. Green across, Captain Diaz replied. Corvette Serene, green and grateful, joked Yarricade, who always named her status like a weather report. Corvette Mendel green. Lena resonance at 0.94 peak, stable. Frost curled a ribbon of vapor around Mendel's port fin as if blessing it for safe passage. We fly on the remembering song, he said. Do not outshout it. Aurelia's heat signature lifted the squad like a sunrise. Locked on the gate's harmonic seam, she intoned. Do not touch your fear with your hands. Let it pass. Back on the conquered spire, Lena's palms pressed to the viewing pane so hard the skin went starfish white. Evan stood behind her with the careful stillness of fathers trying not to flinch at distances they can't fix with a seatbelt. The festival below had thinned to clusters. Even joy yields to reverence when old doors rattle. Threx glanced at Lena's fog-sketched bridge, refreshed, retouched, now bearing a bright red door drawn with fresh breath. "Your drawing has become doctrine," he murmured, not unkind. "That's how rules start," she said without looking away. "Somebody draws a better way to cross." Nairi's chorus, split across the ring in 3 small groups like lanterns left along a trail, hummed harmonics that matched the lullaby exactly. Their voices braided with human throat and dragon resonance until the air on the spire shivered like a plucked string. Space. Around the expedition distorted first at the edges, stars smearing into commas as if punctuation were announcing a sentence you had to read slowly. The lullaby shifted key. Frost answered in a counter-melody so low the Corvette hulls translated it as a tactile thrum underfoot. The smear of light tightened into a seam, then a seam into a slit, then the slit into a door that did not open out or in so much as sideways, like a book you realize you've been holding upside down. "The Ember Gate," Aurelia said, "but soft for names or levers." Serene's helm officer swallowed audibly on the open line. "Reading temperature inversion. That can't be right." "Pocket space," Frost said. "Our rules once. Not precisely hostile, merely other." "On my mark," Ro commanded. 1, 2, mark. They crossed. The first impression was color, not orange like pyros, not black like space, but a saturated ember glow that seemed to come from the idea of light rather than any one source. The second was sound. The lullaby returned to them from everywhere at once, delayed by just enough to prove the place had corners. The third was the size of it wrong. The Corvettes registered distances in contradictory units. Aurelia's wing said the way forward was close and far and exactly as long as it needed to be. "Maintain interval," Diaz called. "If your instruments disagree with your eyes, believe the song." In the Spire's war room, Hayes ran a finger down a flexible display that kept insisting on curves where straight lines should be. "We're inside a memory," they said, half to the room, half to the discipline that raised them. "Architected recollection, dragon-made and sealed. The lullaby is a key in a lock that remembers different hands." "Hands?" Threx asked, eyebrow ridges rising. "Metaphor," Hayes said. "Don't steal my poetry." The corridor unfolded in tiers like stacked amphitheaters rotating very slowly around a quiet center. Frozen in each tier were images flattened into relief, dragon memory made into sculpture and then dissolved into air, younglings sleeping in rings around a quiet hearth, a clutch mother painting constellations with ash on the floor, a human silhouette at the edge of the picture, no face, just the proportions. The tall awkwardness of our kind holding out a jar of water to a dragonling with a cracked scale. "Pause," Ro said. And everyone obeyed because even All listens to that voice. "Recording." Cinder's breath caught over the open channel. Brood name on the arch, ash within ash. "Lost in the first great fire. The human vector present." "I was afraid we were following rumor." "We are not," Aurelia's head dipped. "We sealed this place to stop the ache from leaking. We forgot that ache distilled into instruction." "Movement," Cade said, quiet and sharp. "Low starboard." Redwing swung a light grid. "Not beams, these learned by now." A curtain of non-invasive fluorescence brushed the tier. The light caught on a cluster of objects like cocoons made of cooled slag. Each one pulsed faintly in time with the lullaby. "Are those?" Diaz didn't finish the sentence because his grammar melted. "Eggs," Frost said. The word made the space around him kneel. Not alive, not with bodies. Alive like a held note. Dreaming modules seated with youngling patterns. We must have made them in flight, when we feared extinction. Hoping a future could finish the work a present could not. "Why seal them?" Ro asked. "Because every hand that tried to help wrenched," Aurelia answered. "Because we were tired of being taken apart for our parts." Lena arrays on the human ships chimed in a tone the crews had learned to recognize as, "Yes, this is safe, if you are not a fool." In the spire, Lena pressed her face to the glass and forgot to breathe until Evan's hand found her shoulder. "We can sing them out," she whispered, to no microphone at all, and the room heard her anyway. "Extraction plan," Rose said briskly. "No heat spikes, no claims. Our language should be request, not demand." "Then let us ask," Aurelia said. She folded her body so that her chest hovered just above the cocoons and began to hum. Not the lullaby, but the thing under it, the drone of kinship. Frost layered in the counternote that told sleep when to become waking. Nairi's chorus, piped through a tight beam link, added scaffolding, a shape for return. The corvette's arrays held a perimeter of listening so thorough it felt like hospitality. The cocoons brightened, dimmed, brightened again. One split with a sound like a log cracking in winter. Not a hatchling, no body yet, but a bloom of pattern, a lattice of light bearing the outline of a small dragon in wireframe. It shivered, caught the lullaby, and steadied. Another followed. 8 in total, each one less a person than a promise. They need vessels, Hayes said, mind already laying track. Printable forms capable of growing, fed by heat and taught by... You! Templates exist, Cinder said, voice shaking. We locked them with the eggs. We did not trust the future, Aurelia murmured. And yet here it is, Ro exhaled slowly. We can cradle them in the Spire's biofoundry until Pyros is ready. No off-world claims. We'll sign that in blood and ink. You will sign it in breath, Aurelia said. Which is older? Back at the gate's threshold, if a place like this can be said to have a threshold, the lullaby surged, then softened, as if the corridor itself were satisfied by the day's work. The expedition pivoted on a shared axis and made for home, engines refusing to hurry in the presence of newly dared hope. They emerged into ordinary Starfield with the unglamorous thud of routine gravity catching. The Spire's clamps kissed hulls in their familiar way. In the biofoundry, technicians who had trained for every emergency that involved stopping blood, not starting lives, stood very still until Hayes cracked a joke about issuing everyone aprons. Laughter broke the spell enough for procedure to take its chair. Through a sterile glass, Lena and Evan watched the 8 light lattices settle into cradle rigs that drank heat and exhaled promise. The room had that charged quiet of hospitals and launch bays and kitchens at dawn. Are they babies? Lena asked, voice hushed by instinct. Not yet, Hayes said. They're the idea of babies, which might be the most fragile, powerful thing there is. Aurelia stood on the other side of the glass, nearer the heat. Her neck curved in a shape Evan had learned meant ferocity disguised as tenderness. We thought we were alone, she said, not to anyone and to everyone. We sealed a door to stop the past from flooding us. We forgot doors also let futures in. Threx of all people cleared his throat in the awkward prelude to sentiment. We will need a word, he said, for enemies turned responsibilities. For burdens turned blessings. He tasted the unfamiliar syllable and did not spit it out. Family, Lena offered, simple as she could make it. Too big a word, Threx protested on reflex. Exactly big enough, Aurelia corrected, and did not smile so much as glow. Outside the foundry, the festival began to find its instruments again, a hive chord modulated to accommodate lullaby countersong. The tripedal percussionist discovered the joy of syncopation. Someone passed around fruit cylinders and insisted, accurately, that they tasted better after you saved something. Evan sat on the bench where last night's plan had been drawn, jacket over Lena's shoulders, both of them staring through the glass like it was an altar. Bridges don't get tired, he said softly, answering a question from earlier because some answers require new facts. They get reinforced, Lena nodded, eyes bright. We'll bring them home, she said. All the way. Properly. Properly, Aurelia echoed, and the heat in the word felt like permission. 8 light lives now cradle on the spire, half memory, half becoming. When the first opens its eyes, will it remember a human lullaby? And what will it ask us to become in return? Dawn on the conquered spire isn't a sunrise so much as a decision. Lights warm by a fraction, vents exhale bakery air, and the long windows dim their stars just enough to persuade bodies toward breakfast. In the biofoundry's quiet heart, 8 cradle rigs counted out the seconds in soft green pulses. The light lattices inside, ideas of dragons wrapped in equations and hope, had been steady all night, drinking calibrated heat, listening to a lullaby that now felt less like a key and more like a blanket. Evan arrived with mugs that would never make it past sterile doors but were holy anyway. Hayes was already there, hair doing its perpetual argument with gravity, eyes bright in the way of people who've slept just enough to be dangerous. 2 of them spiked pattern coherence at Oro 410, they said. Good spikes, the kind that mean hello but in math. Hello is a good first word, Evan said, and felt the unearned lump in his throat. A chime at the room's perimeter acknowledged a heat signature older than treaties. Aurelia folded herself into the threshold, careful as a cathedral stooping through a cottage door. Frost took the far side, cooling the ambient temperature by 1/2 degree because summer needs winter to sharpen it. Threx and Nairi followed, flanked by a human ethics trio and a dragon memory keeper, whose scales carried the soft shimmer of stories. Lena skidded in 3 heartbeats later, hair braided with a ribbon the color of Pyros's orange skies, jacket too big on purpose. She spread both hands on the glass and whispered, "Wake when you're ready," as if the words could decide the morning. Hayes toggled the comm. We've scaffolded the next phase. Printable growth matrices are loaded, organic ceramic hybrids tuned for thermal flex. Once a lattice commits to embodiment, the matrices will shape around the pattern. We go slow. We ask, not tell. Language of request, Aurelia said, a nod rolling down her long neck like a small tide. We remember. Ethics Officer Padmini cleared her throat, voice careful not to turn ceremony into scolding. We confirm shared intent. No specimen leaves Spire custody without joint human-dragon sign-off. No archival claims by any third party. All education non-coercive. All naming consensual. Name comes last, Cinder said gently from her corner of light. Names are doors too. We let the person fit the word, not the word shape the person. The far left cradle blinked from green to amber. Then the third from the right, amber, then a quick breath of gold. The lullaby shifted key by a hair. Aurelia answered with a tone so low the glass hummed a private agreement. The amber deepened. Here we go, Hayes breathed. The first lattice thickened, delicate wireframe brightening until the light drew itself inward like a breath taken on purpose. In the rig's central channel, the printable matrix blossomed. Petal layers of pale material unfurling along invisible lines, guided by the pattern's insistence. Not a full body, not yet. A vessel. Specific as a recipe and loose enough to let a soul grow. The room leaned forward without moving. Heat plus story, Frost murmured. Just like us. The second lattice followed suit. Its geometry fractionally different. Slimmer through the chest, a longer sweep to the nascent wings. The rigs recorded, adjusted, sang back tiny corrective tones humans would have mistaken for fan noise if the stakes were smaller. On the main screen, streams of data braided, thermal maps, resonance plots, the Lena array's empathic readouts. Threx squinted at the last, still learning to trust a graph that tried to quantify feel. What's that spike? Attention, Hayes said. They're noticing the singing. Can they hear us? Lena asked, bouncing between awe and courtesy like a skipping stone. Aurelia turned her head so one eye filled Lena's reflection. They hear you most. Me? You are the first voice that asked us if we were lonely, the dragon said simply. They carry that question in their making. The first vessel flexed, micro-muscles waking under the foundry's gentle sun. Its eyes closed because bodies have rituals, flickered with a light just shy of opening. The lullaby eased. Hayes made a tiny cutting gesture. Hold. Let this happen at its own speed. Alarms choose dramatic timing because it's the only way anyone will respect them. The security thread on Ro's console flashed a polite red. We have a visitor, the Admiral said over the line, calm like a seatbelt. Docking port 6. Compact observers plus 1 uninvited attachment. A private syndicate rep with a salvage license trying to rebrand as humanitarian. They filed a claim on archival artifacts of non-sapient origin. What part of no claims was written in invisible ink? Padmini muttered, then lifted her mic. Port 6 will receive observers who signed the paper. The rest get tea at the airlock and a nice view of the go-away sign. Neri's chorus flickered with a dozen amused harmonics. We can write an addendum. No claims even if you brought cupcakes. Threx's scales cooled to a shade Evan had learned meant anger with its teeth sheathed. I will greet them, he said. Diplomacy enjoys witnesses and door locks. Aurelia did not take her gaze from the cradles. We will remain. There are firsts inside this room that do not wait for the slow work of telling outsiders to behave. Back at the glass, Lena's fingertip traced the faint outline of the closest vessel the way you might draw around a sleeping kitten, without waking it. If they open their eyes, what should I say? What you told me, Aurelia answered. Hello, you are not alone. We will listen before we speak. Hayes gave the smallest nod. Okay, little ones, they whispered, hands hovering over controls they hoped not to use. Consent to embody. If yes, lean toward heat. If no, hold your song and we'll keep you safe inside light. The first vessel leaned, microns then millimeters, toward the heat well. The rig answered with a sigh that sounded like the foundry itself approving. A soft hiss as growth channels opened. The eyelids fluttered again, the way dawn learns its job. And then the left lid lifted. A pupil blossomed. Not human round. Not a serpent's slit, but a vertical oval with a bright ring of molten amber at the rim. It focused not on the lights but on the shadow, the dark that makes light legible. It found Aurelia first, as right as gravity. A sound emerged, small and hoarse and unprogrammed. Warm. Not a word from a list. A choice. The room forgot how to breathe, then remembered all at once and almost laughed. Aurelia lowered her head so the small one could see itself reflected in a living eye. Yes, she said, and all the heat in the syllable felt like a promise. Warm and welcome. The second vessel's lids quivered, jealous of a sibling's first. It opened to a cooler gaze, a thoughtful quiet. Bright, it said, tasting the consonant like a new texture. Bright, Frost agreed, letting a veil of cool curl around the rig, the contrast teaching the body its edges. Hayes swallowed. We need provisional designations for logs. No names, Cinder reminded softly, but we can mark their first words as a kindness. Warm and bright, Lena said, reverent as she could manage and still be herself. Okay. Padmini's comm clicked once, a satisfied punctuation. Syndicate turned around at the tea. Apparently we do not serve cupcakes. Shame, Neri sang. We would have invented a new frosting called legal precedent. The third cradle blushed amber. The fourth hesitated, then mirrored. Hayes kept the pace kind, slowing a parameter here, widening a ramp there. Embodiment chose its own steps. Outside the glass, the foundry's peripheral corridor filled with quiet feet. Engineers pretending to check gauges. Cooks pretending to deliver coffee. A janitor pretending to clean a spotless floor while crying very softly. Evan's hand found Lena's shoulder again when her excitement leaned into the glass too hard. Gentle, he murmured. I know, she said, then in a whisper toward the cradles. No hurry. Take the long way if you like it better. Warm blinked, processing the idea that time could be chosen. It tucked its head under a not-quite-formed forelimb in a gesture that was both dragon and universal baby. Bright tried a second word, eyebrows, which it did not have, somehow furrowing anyway. Listen, it said, and everyone did. From somewhere deep in the spire, the festival, postponed, not cancelled, found the lullaby again and wove it into a dance. The machines in rehab labs stirred and settled, recognizing the tune as a directive to stand down and pay attention to joy. Threx's voice drifted in from port 6, smooth as a bridge, firm as a gate. This door is not yours to name. Aurelia lifted her gaze to gather the room. We will need teachers, she said. For heat, for story, for not setting the kitchen on fire when the kettle boils. Sign me up, Hayes said. Us too, Neri's chorus chimed, harmonizing with ridiculous enthusiasm. Me, Lena said, small hand raised, rule-abiding even at history's elbow. I can teach sharing, and how to line up without pushing. You will teach us, Aurelia said, and didn't bother hiding the pride. In the rigs, 2 more lattices tugged toward becoming. The morning moved like honey. No rush, no shortcuts, just the long, ordinary miracle of first done properly.